The video game industry is lobbying against a bill currently furthest along in Nebraska, which will require manufacturers to provide replacement parts and diagnostic instruction manuals to independent repair companies. The game industry currently owns a comfortable monopoly on aftermarket repair of consoles and are sending lobbyists around the country to oppose such bills. For more information on the news and other stories, visit our blog at finalencountercast.com.
That is so shady. So shady.
Like the thing is, too, whenever I've had any problems with consoles, which usually isn't anything like more than the red ring of death, if we remember.
Right.
You send it in, they fix it for free and send it back to you.
If it's under warranty.
Yes, if it's under warranty, man.
I had even left a game in there, like, on accident, and when it came back, it was in, like, a nice little, like, padded little, like you know, case and stuff, so it didn't get, like, ruined or anything like that. I'm like, oh, that's where that went.
But still, though, I mean, like, let's say, you know, you still would have to send it in, and then if you're out of warranty, I think it was like $120 for like PS2s or something like that. And if you don't have the money to do that, or if you just rather fix it yourself, I mean, don't you think it's kind of better to have more options as a consumer?
I was gonna say, as a consumer, I feel like this isn't like. Is this really like that evil of a thing? Shouldn't other places be able to repair?
No, I think Nate was saying like it's evil for like the game companies to be sending lobbyists and like, you know, these Bill Hatchet men to try to kill something like that.
That's fair.
Yeah,
That's
because fair. I mean, I think you do want third-party repair shops to have the ability and the expertise. They're talking about cutting off the source of information and making that all proprietary. Like, you're talking about having you know, things like screws be made to a specific tool set so that only Sony
has those screws.
Has the screwdriver for
yes,
it.
exactly. Yeah. And you know, there's no way to to buy that on the open market.
Actually,
Sony controls that.
Kind of surprised that it's taken this long. I mean, what generation of consoles are we in now? And this is just now kind of starting to get traction.
I mean, but it's the industry's just now getting, well, not just now, but I want to say maybe in the past 15 years, gotten to a point to where it's so large that maybe governments start to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, in the early 90s, I mean, you can't really say games were big enough to warrant legislation.
That's fair.
The government trying to get into that shooter's phone was something that brought a story like this or a subject like this to the forefront of consciousness, and when you do that, you're going to inevitably end up attracting dollars. You're going to get money thrown at you. And when you get money thrown at you and you can hire lobbyists like that, now you are seeing the whole right to repair issue being discussed and talked about. And I think that that's really weird. I don't want one place to be responsible for repairing things. Not only that, but it prevents modding and homebrewing. And, you know, I'm not a huge advocate of that stuff, but I think that the people who do, they shouldn't be punished for it.
That stuff pushes the industry forward
It
in
does.
a way, too. So, I mean, to like kind of, which we always thought, like, you know, the game companies or big publishers and stuff kind of were for stuff like that. Like, hey, kind of manipulate our stuff because, you know what, it might have a great idea that we implement later on. So that's kind of a 180 on that. And then also, I mean, it would be like owning a bike and you can't take it to your local bike shop. You have to send your Huffy back to Huffy. Yeah,
you got to mail it. You got to, you got to wait the 7 weeks.
If they embraced more like that, like they should get a hold of all these dudes that are like installing like capture cards on DSs and be like, we want to turn you into a little branch of our own.
But that's even worse.
Yeah.
That's even worse because now you're taking out an entire sector of like small business owners and stuff like that.
Well, they at least need to protect them then.
I mean, I think that the right to repair does. That the whole concept of right to repair does. And, you know, I think that this is an important issue that people have got to pay attention to, especially if you're into, modding and home brewing. This is going to have a big impact on your ability to do that. And if you do that, the ability to trace you, track you, and punish you we see that a lot. Like, the concept of hacking is not a very well looked upon thing right now. Like,
It's a scary buzzword.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, like, for a couple of years, it wasn't, because you would see at things like makers fairs, you would see, like, DIY hackathons, and it was basically like kids being given like a circuit board and being taught how that circuit board works,
right,
or taking something that already exists and modifying it and teaching them how to modify code or modify hardware, things like that. And they were very simple, hands-on technology demonstrations to get people and kids comfortable with using and modifying technology. All of those would be technically illegal. Like, all of that would be punishable by whoever holds that copyright and whoever created that IP. And I think that that's really not good. Like, I think that that's really bad, especially like when you consider, and Norris, I love the point that you brought up, is that it does drive the industry. Take something as simple as emulation, right? Emulation is an extension of the same thing, okay? And when Nintendo released that throwback console that had that 30 NES games on it, right?
Yeah.
When people went in and actually looked at the ROM files that were in there, they had found that they were actual ROM files that were basically downloaded from the internet.
Yeah.
That was not something that came from Nintendo's internal structure. It's not like that came from their own internal archive, because there is something very specific that's done to a ROM file that makes it a ROM file, that makes it able to run in an emulator. And that coding was included in all of the different game files that were on Nintendo's official system. So you can't tell me that this doesn't have some kind of circuitous cycle involved that the game publishers themselves end up seeing a benefit from, whether it's short-term engineering like that, being able to throw a bunch of games on what is essentially a flash drive and put an HDMI port on it and put it out for, less than $100, and there you go. There's new hardware from Nintendo.
Or the dude who turned a N64 into a handheld.
I mean, that stuff is so cool.
I know it is.
That stuff is so cool, and I bristle at the notion that any of that kind of stuff is wrong or somehow infringes inherently on someone's IP. If they go out and sell it, that's kind of a different story. If they try to make significant profit off it, that's a different story.
And here's the funny thing, like, so look at the auto industry, for instance, right? If you would have had maybe Honda or Mitsubishi come out and lobby so hard against aftermarket manufacturers, then you have a large part of their market share that probably would not have existed because people got so into the whole tuner thing at the turn of the century. So in this, I look at it like the manufacturers are kind of being short-sighted here, because as you said, that's going to drive some of the innovation of the industry forward. So if you have a bunch of people who aren't able to actually just tinker with the consoles or repair their own consoles, then you have an entire subset of future hardware developers or even software engineers that you're not going to have, because they won't have the opportunity to do that stuff.
But I think it's also the game industry coming out and really saying, like, we don't believe our customers are smart enough to be able to service their own devices or modify their own devices. And we know that game companies have been really, really bad about proprietary hardware. That's the reason that we're now buying consoles in 3-year cycles instead of 10-year cycles. And when we posed the question before, I think a lot of us had really liked the idea of more modular hardware where the user can swap in and out pieces as need be to be able to run better and better games. And I think that this really takes the legs out from under that idea. Right. I think that video game video game hardware makers really want you to be buying new hardware every 3 years.
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's very sustainable for them.
No, it's not. But I mean, just even something as simple as how you could swap out a hard drive and put in a much larger hard drive. Something as simple as that in the future could become virtually impossible with the type of legislation that they're supporting. And that right there, in my opinion, kills consoles.
I mean, think about what Apple does to their products regularly. A lot of times, RAM is even soldered straight to the motherboard. I don't know if they've changed that practice, but there was a time where they used to solder every swappable part out to their motherboards. And
see, I don't know about consoles being guilty of it, because someone pointed out in the chat that originally consoles had like a 5-year cycle, and the PS3 360 broke that by going 10 years. But when you look at phones, they'll actually stop supporting certain phones with updates. I mean, I fell victim to that. I had that Galaxy S6 for 2 years, and it was worthless. You have an S5 that was upgraded further than mine was, because I got mine unlocked from Amazon.
But it's different with phones, because phones are usually subsidized by your service provider. So if, I don't know, AT&T was subsidizing your Xbox, then you probably would get a new one every 2 years.
Yeah.
Because you'd only be paying $150, $200 for it. So that's why that can work for phones. And for consoles, I just see it as a really short-sighted and silly idea.
No, I do too, unless they start doing shorter runs of hardware, which I think is also very short-sighted, because we see Nintendo do that to the point where they're accused of artificial scarcity all the time.
Yeah.
I didn't even know the Wii U was a new generation. I just thought it was another upgrade to the Wii.
But that's
different argument.
That's different.
Yeah.
That came down to a whole bunch of brand decisions that they should not have made. But I think we'll see this with the Switch, that the hardware is going to hit the market. People are going to be impressed with it. A lot more people are going to want it than have pre-orders right now. I know I want it as soon as it becomes reasonably available, but you're going to have a run on it, much like you've seen a run on a lot of other Nintendo products. The question is, how long is that run going to be? So unless hardware makers really do start creating less product that they end up having to move at the end of the cycle, less units that they have to move at the end of a console's life cycle, then I don't really see what the benefit is to this move.
I don't either. And just to wrap it up, I mean, honestly, if you have consoles with a shorter life, then you actually don't have the good quality of games I think that you would have, because developers don't have the time to squeeze as much out of the hardware as they can. So a game like Red Dead Redemption or The Last of Us, those games were not Red Dead, but The Last of Us, which was sort of kind of at the end of PS3's life cycle. I mean, that was a game that I honestly probably didn't really think was possible on PS3 because of the sophistication of some of the lighting effects and everything, and the engine was fully realized. And
Phantom Pain.
Yeah, Phantom Pain. It took a long time to get to that point.
Right.
And if you're having a 3-year life cycle on your consoles, you're simply just not gonna have that quality of game anymore.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. But then again, I think that the architecture is becoming a lot more unified. We're seeing engines that are easily transferable between platforms, like the Unity engine or Unreal. And if game designers are using those and trying to move off of these proprietary game development platforms like Square Enix has been trying to do for years, then I think what you'll end up seeing is console exclusivity being solely driven by the business, by the industry, and the dick shaking and deals that go on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't think that the exact architecture that was used for previous generations is necessarily applicable here.
I mean, it may not be, but in the same sense, all it takes is for some studio to come up with a new engine or something that's really revolutionary, and then everybody's going to want to use it.
Right. And but at this point, it's almost like you can take a lot of the assets that you've built and probably scale those up. You know what I mean? Like, it's not developing for a system is really, you're developing for the engine and then deciding which hardware to put the engine on,
right,
which hardware to tune the engine for. And it can be a dynamic process. That's why we see so many games that are, all virtually the same experience between Xbox One and PlayStation 4.
Right.
So, to me, I think that the challenge is not necessarily on the game designers, but the onus is now on the hardware makers to figure out how to sell those units that they end up making, right? Because as a game developer, you're just developing for the graphic system.
The engine.
Yeah, the engine. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Anyway, if you want to chime in on this discussion, you can give us a call, 810-207-1764.